Welcome, folks. We're going to give a few more minutes to let all of the people who have registered gather and get here. So thanks for your patience. We'll get rolling in just a moment. All right, we'll go ahead and kick things off. I think folks can make their way in, but I don't want to take away important time from our topic today. Really grateful to see all of you. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Elizabeth Beggins. I am the Agriculture Outreach Specialist for the Million Acre Challenge, which is a collaborative project supported by American Farmland Trust, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and Future Harvest, in addition to a host of other ag partners across the region. Our goal of 1 million acres of agricultural land in healthy soils and regenerative practices by 2030 is one we really hope you will help us reach in the ways that are accessible to you. I want to just very briefly go over a couple of items that relate to the work of the Million Acre Challenge, which is captured in this slide. Our soil testing and benchmarking is overseen by PASA, Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture, and my colleague, Lisa Garfield, who is research director and manages the Million Acre Challenge for Future Harvest. Lisa is with us today, but seems to be having some connectivity issues, so you may see her pop in and out quite literally. We also offer many other kinds of networking opportunities for producers and others, like today's event, also field days. We have advanced farmer networks operating around the state, which are designed to put producers in community with one another. We also have opportunities for practice implementation funding, a couple of which I'm going to mention in just a moment. And we are working to develop economic case studies through American Farmland Trust to support the need for producers to really see the value of soil health on their bottom lines. The main thing I want to leave you with today regarding the Million Acre Challenge is that we are a farmer-focused initiative. We really do see farmers as experts and recognize that most are already working to steward the land that they are in charge of, and our role is to try to help them do that. So speaking of funding opportunities, the Million Acre Challenge is just launching a regional conservation partnership program with NRCS. The acronym is RCPP. It is a public-private partnership that allows projects or organizations such as ours to partner with NRCS to deliver cost share using different strategies to reach different audiences, and also to prioritize the particular practices that this project and the farmers we work with have identified as really important to our region. As part of the partnership, we were able to negotiate a 100% cost share opportunity. So this is, as I said, just now sort of launching, and we want to be sure that those of you in the room who have connection with this are aware of it, in particular folks who are working in and with NRCS offices. We're really happy to have the opportunity to do this. It is available to farmers in Maryland, of all scales, all production systems on owned or leased land with priority to underserved producers. We don't yet have our applications in hand for this, but be on the lookout for those. And you'll be hearing more from us about this particular opportunity. This is just sort of a review and also captures some of the things I haven't yet mentioned. Some of our networking and community and technical and financial support opportunities can be found via our Lunch and Learns, which happen every second Wednesday of the month, called Soil Health to Go. We also offer monthly newsletters. We're active on social media, and we have a YouTube channel where we post recorded events like today's. The QR code at the top will take you to our website where you can access all of those and more information. The second QR code takes you to the recent Lunch and Learn, which was all about the Million Acre Challenge RCPP. So if you want to know more about that or share it with farmers in your network, check that out. And then just to mention quickly that we are also involved through Future Harvest with the Climate Smart Farming and Marketing Program, also led by PASA. And there's a QR code there to that website. All of these projects are really just getting underway. So this is kind of tip of the iceberg so that you guys are aware that these things are happening with and through Million Acre Challenge. Our email addresses are there at the bottom. My colleague Amanda Cather is here with us today. She works with American Farmland Trust. I work with Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and Lisa Garfield is with Future Harvest. And now we're about to get to the meat of the matter. I'm really pleased to introduce our speaker, Michael Baker, who is the Maryland State Planning Specialist and oversees the Technical Service Program. Through his expertise, we're really hoping that today you're going to learn kind of what a TSP does and how to launch the process of becoming one. Though his work is in Maryland, these are federal programs and policies, so most of this information is going to be transferable no matter which state you're dialing in from. Michael, it's our pleasure to have you. I'm really appreciative of you taking time to be with us today. And I'm going to turn the floor over to you and give you a chance to bring your own program up.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And then I will share this. All right. Can you guys see the introduction to technical service providers for TSPs?
Yes.
Sweet. And how's my volume? Because I'm going to wear a headset, so I don't have to talk as loud. It's good?
It seems good to me, and I did fail to mention, we will be taking a few sort of intentional pauses as Michael goes through his program and monitoring the chat as we go along. So folks, you're welcome to put questions or comments in chat. It would be helpful to go ahead and mute yourselves for now, but if at some point you want to come off mute in order to speak your question aloud, you're also
So I'm
welcome.
automatically on mute. Yeah, because my wife's.
Actually, you're not automatically on mute, but we'll get there. Thanks, everybody. Michael?
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Michael Baker. I'm the state planning specialist for the USDA's NRCS. And part of my job responsibilities as the state planning specialist is to be the TSP coordinator for the state. And so today I'll be going over an introduction to the Technical Service Providers Program through the lens of prospective TSPs. And if you guys don't mind, I'm gonna, do I need to keep my camera on, or is it okay if I turn it off?
I think your preference.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it off. But I just wanted to say hello so you guys can put a name to a face, and then we'll get going here. So thank you for that. Okay, so in today's agenda, we're going to go over an introduction to the TSP program, what it is, who it's for, and kind of how it works. So these are going to be like generalities of how the program works. Of course, there's going to be intricacies to, certain nuances of part of the program, but for today, we're just going to go over the generalities of the program. And then we're going to talk about the transition from the 2014 to 2018 Farm Bill and what that means for us, and how that provides more opportunities for TSPs to participate more in our Farm Bill programs. After that, we'll talk about the application process, which includes what it looks like from beginning to end, from your perspective on what that how to become how to submit an application, or what's needed to submit an application, and then the process of certification. The next part is segues into that certification process, which is what we'll call the deliverables. The deliverables are the things that we are expecting TSPs to provide to us, whether it be for an application for certification to become a TSP, or certification for a particular activity or practice. After that, I'll talk about the available resources that you have available that can help you understand the planning process and some of the technical, the way that we would frame a technical measurements, and then so we're all kind of speaking the same language. And then I'll wrap it up with quality assurance with TSPs, and then if we have any time left over, I'll provide a demonstration of sharing my screen and showing you where these sites are, and we'll go into some more specific questions if there are any. So with the share screen. So a brief introduction. So what is a TSP, and why should you become one? So a TSP is an acronym for a technical service provider. It's a certification process that goes through NRCS, and it's stored on the NRCS registry. And once you've been awarded a certification of becoming a TSP, or you're certified as a TSP for a certain activity or practice, then you can do work for clients on Farm Bill contracts as a certified TSP. What it is not, though, it's not a certification to say that you've been certified by the NRCS to do X, Y, and Z, because there is no quality assurance with the agency and work being done outside of our program. So the two biggest benefits for working through the TSP program with the NRCS is it provides quality assurance for our customers, and it also provides them financial assistance to pay for your services. And without working through the program, we can neither give you money or assure that the quality, or assure that the quality of the work that's being provided meets NRCS standards. So these next couple of slides, we'll be talking about the three big players that exist in this TSP program, and their roles and their responsibilities. So you have the NRCS, you have the TSPs, and then you have the eligible participant, which I'll sometimes refer to as the client. So we'll talk about the interactions between these two and who's responsible for what and when. So the first role that we'll talk about is the participant, or the client's role. Since they are the contract holder, they're the decision maker, and they're responsible for the outcome of the contract. So when a participant applies for a Farm Bill contract, there are dates and expectations for when things need to get done. And ultimately, those deadlines need to be met, and those deadlines are the responsibility of the contract holder. So that's their responsibility. They're also in this program. They play the role of an employer. I'll mention this a few times in this because it's kind of important, but you should not get, like, you as a TSP should not be hired before a participant signs or is obligated a contract. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail, but it's up to the participant to interview and hire and negotiate a contract with the TSP. And then the last part is that they're a coordinator between the TSP and the NRCS. So when the TSP is then hired on by the participant, we can't share, the NRCS cannot share information with the participant unless there's a written consent form. And we can't, we as the NRCS are not responsible, or we can't talk to the TSP without talking to the participant, because they're the contract holders, so they're the ones that are responsible for this. We can talk to the participant or the TSP if you know, if there's again that written permission, but the participant has to play an active role in the creation of the contract item that's being implemented. So the relationship, or what are the roles and responsibilities for the TSP? The TSP, once you get hired on, one of the more important things that you need to do is you need to create a written agreement or a contract that sets out the expectations for what it is that needs to be done. So those can include the cost, when, the timelines, what needs to be provided, like when, and this is to protect you and if there is a dispute between you and the participant. And as the slide says, the NRCS doesn't play a role in any dispute that happens between the TSP and the participant. The only thing that we do in this a situation is that we get we get a packet, let's say the activity, and the participant agrees on that activity, it hands over to us, and we either say that it meets our standard or it doesn't meet our standard. And so if it doesn't meet our standard and there's a dispute between the two parties, the NRCS is not going to get involved in that. Okay, so what are the responsibilities of the NRCS? So we are the program administration. So that's the TSP coordinator. That would be myself for the state of Maryland. So I handled the applications, the renewals, trainings, and I set up quality assurance processes for all of the work that's done through the TSP program. The field office staff, which is the staff that you'll probably be working more closely with, as they will be the ones that are managing the contracts, are going to be the they're going to be the ones that you have a better relationship with, or a closer relationship with than myself, or that should be that way. So their responsibilities, and I need to point this out because it's clearly written in policy, that an example that I was going to talk about is when I worked in Connecticut, and there were foresters that would go to a landowner's a landowner and say, hey, I can write you a forest management plan, but if you want to pay for it out of pocket, I can do it right now. But if you want to apply for a farm bill program, the NRCS will pay you to then pay me. And so even if the TSP is directing particular people to the NRCS for those farm bill applications, we have an obligation to provide a complete list of all the certified TSPs within that jurisdiction to the landowner. So that's a responsibility that we have. And then the field offices will also do quality assurance. So they're the ones that will be reviewing the work that you have provided within their administrative areas. And then the last part of it is that they participate in contract management. So they'll be in communication with the client or the participant, and when appropriate, the TSP on the progress that the contract is making. Okay, so another thing that needs to happen is communication between all three parties. And one thing that we've done out of the 2014 or out of the 2018 Farm Bill that's different than the past is that we've required that before any work is done, after the contract has been obligated, and before any work is done, that all three parties come together and have a discussion about the expectations and the process of what it is that the participant has signed up for, so everyone is on the same page. And this would be a good time for the participant to have written or signed over permissions with the NRCS to give the NRCS permissions to communicate with the TSP directly if the participant chooses to do so. Okay, so this is the only knowledge check that I have here, but I think it's kind of an important one. So the question is, if a TSP developed a conservation plan before the contract is signed and approved by both the client and the NRCS, who pays for that TSP technical service? And I'll give you a few seconds to read and think about it. And the correct answer is C. The client will pay the TSP out of their own expense. So just so you're aware, like if you develop the plan before the contract is written, in the eyes of the government, there's no need for the contract because we're paying for something that should not have already happened. So that's just kind of a little nuance there to make sure that you guys are familiar with how the program works. So that's the end of this first section. As Elizabeth mentioned at the very beginning, we were going to leave some time for people to ask questions. I think I might see some questions in the chat. It's not opening up for me. Are there questions in the chat? Or are there any questions about the program so far before we get going?
There's nothing in chat right now. Those are sort of legacy and housekeeping things.
Oh, pardon me.
No, that's okay. Anybody have questions they wanted to ask, clarifications needed for the first chunk of information?
I can ask a quick question, sort of based on the last quiz that you gave us, but just wondering to make sure I understand, if the contract was signed, in other words, the process unfolded properly, would NRCS compensate the TSP on the client's behalf? Is that how that works? Or do they pay the client and the client pays the TSP?
So we'll get to that. I think what you're asking is, contract's been obligated and we've done everything in the application process for the Farm Bill application as needed. They hire you, you write the plan, and then the question is who does that contract who is that contract awarded to? Is that the question?
I think so. I mean, in my mind, the way I was articulating it was more like, how does the money flow in that relationship? It all starts with NRCS, but is it going to the client and then the TSP, or the TSP
Yep.
first?
So that would it technically goes to the client, but there are methods and there's forms that contract participants can, or contract holders can have, that can give the money directly to you. It's just some more paperwork that you would have to fill out. But because all the money that we provide our customers is taxable, so when you sign a Farm Bill contract, that has to go, that's a 1099 that gets delivered to them. So technically it would go through them to you. So they would still show up as getting that 1099, but you could get paid directly by them with a process, or we could just pay them and then it could turn around and pay you. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks.
Okie doke.
Michael, we do have another question, or kind of a set of questions. Devin from Nofa, New Jersey is looking for guidance for writing contracts or resources for private TSPs, rather TSPs acting in direct contract with the landowner and not within an NRCS agreement.
TSPs aren't writing Farm Bill contracts. The NRCS is responsible for writing the contracts and administering the contracts. There's no private contracts that the TSPs would be writing. I'm not quite sure what you mean by the acting in direct contact with the landowner or not within NRCS agreement. Do you want to elaborate on that, or I'm not really sure. Okay, doke.
Hang on, there's more here. It's okay, feel free to move on. It may be also, Devin, there are a lot of acronomial, I made up that word, nuances. So TSP is I think a specific term, and you may be looking for ways to engage in other kinds of technical service that isn't really a TSP. So thanks for the permission to move on. Feel free to chime back in if you want to.
Okay. All right. So the next subject is the activities transition. So this is what happened because of the 2018 Farm Bill. So if you were a TSP prior to the 2018 Farm Bill, you might have been familiar with the Conservation Activity Plan. That's the CAP. CAPs were plans that were listed there below, like a CNMP, a forest management plan, a grazing plan. And there was some ambiguity as to what was really expected for those plans. It was unclear as to whether or not, is it a plan only? Is there a design? Is there, whatever. So some states interpreted the policy much differently than other states. So there was inconsistency across state lines. And so out of the 2018 Farm Bill, we bore out 3 new activities that clearly defined expectations for those particular activities, which in turn actually provided more opportunities for TSPs to participate in the program. And it became more equitable because now there is clear, consistent expectations for all of the activities across state lines. So it was a step in the right direction. So these next few slides will talk about the activities and what those are. There's 3 of them. But I guess before I go on, it might be good to kind of do a little vocabulary here. So when I'm talking about an activity, those are specific to the TSP program, and they're typically their plans or their technical guidance documents for administration of a particular plan. When we're talking about practices, those are things that we use to address like resource concerns. Those are either like management things or structural things that we can apply on a landscape, whereas like the activities are more like a report. So the first activity that we'll be talking about is the conservation planning activity, and in general, that includes the first 7 steps of the planning process. Which if you decide to become a TSP, you'll go through an ag-learn course that'll talk to you about the 9 steps of the planning process. But essentially, what that planning or the CPA needs to have outlined is it needs to identify what's the problem, what are the objectives of the client, how did you identify that problem, what steps are we going to do to address that problem, are there other opportunities for us to address that problem, and how did we like make a decision and to that, which is a really important step, because you might decide that we need to do like this, but the producer or the client wants to do that, and you need to document that. And you'll learn about that more in detail as you take these ag-learn courses. Okay, so a newer addition to the activities or the TSP program is the DIA. It's confusingly named the design and implementation activity. And it's confusing because there is no implementation, it's strictly just designing practices. I try to make a graphic down here that try to illustrate how this works. And is my mouse visible here? Or is it like, I like this laser pointer.
It is, yes, we can see that.
Okay, sweet, thank you. All right, so how this works with the DIAs is that the DIAs are designing practices that have been identified to address resource concerns within a plan. And so let's say in this particular example, there's invasive species, there's the structure, the forest is even age, and there's little wildlife habitat. So you've identified invasive species as a resource concern, structure and composition for the forest, and then inadequate wildlife habitat as resource concerns. And so you are providing practices within this plan as to these are things that will address those resource concerns. Well, what we can then do is take that a step further. Oh, sorry. Let me sorry about that. So anyway, the practices, like specifics, like what does success look like? We've identified that this is a problem, but what does success look like? So that would be what the DIA does, and it would say, okay, for us to get rid of the invasives, we're going to do brush management, and we're going to do it this way, if that makes sense. So the key takeaway here is that you have to have a plan to do a DIA to then design the practices. And as TSPs, if you're going to be if you're going to certify yourself as a if you're going to certify in a DIA, you need to also be certified in practices that are relevant to that DIA. Otherwise, there's really no need for you to get certified in a DIA, because then if there's a DIA in conservation practices, you haven't demonstrated to us that you have, like that you can plan or design this practice to address a resource concern. Okay, so the last activity that we'll talk about is the conservation evaluation and monitoring activity, which is the CEMA, which is sort of the odd one out. It is a little bit different because it's not necessarily tied to a part of the planning process. It can kind of be put anywhere, and I'll provide an example of that in an upcoming slide. And another thing that makes it different from the DIAs and the CPAs is that it doesn't require you to be a certified TSP. Each CEMA has a section in it that is the qualified individual requirements. And for this one, this is the soil health CEMA. This is soil health test and evaluation. And so if you wanna be able to write this plan, you have to meet one of these particular criteria, and then you can write the CEMA 216. So they're a little bit different, and like I said, in a upcoming slide, I'll talk about how you could use that CEMA as it relates to soil health. So just real quick summary of this, so we can kind of tie it all together, is that you have a CPA, that's the plan that addresses that identifies the problem and what are the practices to address that problem. The DIA is looking at the designs that were called out in the plan and what are the specifications for those designs to address the problem. And then the CEMA is a practice that you can use outside to evaluate the effectiveness of the practices that were implemented. And so before we go, like the next thing I'll talk about is, and this helps with like planning, is like understanding what can be paired together and what cannot be paired together. So if you were wanting to, like a participant could sign up for a contract that has a CPA only, a DIA only, or conservation practices, or CEMA, that's fine. But pairing can be a little difficult and a little more nuanced. So we can do a CPA and a DIA together. That makes sense and I'll show it in a later slide about how that process would work, because you need the plan first done and certified before you can start writing the designs. That kind of leads into this part right here, where having a design and conservation practices together can be a little more difficult. Let's say you are so practices, let's say a timber stand or a forest stand improvement is a practice that we want to do to address that even age stand that we were looking at. Now, because there's a wildlife component to resource concern that we talked about there, do we want to do a thinning for wildlife, or do we want to do a crop tree release and do oak regeneration? And that is all dependent on site-specific information as to whether or not each site can do whichever one, and then you would then design that. And so it's hard for us to pair these two things together because without designing it, we're not sure what practice scenario you would need because you know, like we kind of need to design. There are exceptions to this, but oftentimes designing something in the same contract as a practice can be difficult. And that's important to note because that crop tree release or that thinning example that I provided, those are two different payments for for the same practice. So and if it comes out that we have to change it because the payment rate is not appropriate for one reason or another because of the design, then we have to do a contract modification, and that just takes more time, and it's not as necessary. So we should do this stuff up front. But that's just to give you a little background on that. So let's talk about how to incorporate that SEMA into, since it is kind of odd, into a management system. So the SEMA 216 is a soil health management plan. And what you could do is you could do a soil health management plan at the beginning of a contract and get a baseline evaluation of the information that is required in those SEMAs, that's required in that SEMA. Then you can do some practices that you think are going to address soil health. In this case, we're giving soil carbon amendment. And we're going to do that for 3 years, and then we'll finish it off with a SEMA at the very end to see the progress. And then that way you can do like the SEMA is an evaluation. It's like, how effective was what we did, and what can we learn from what we did as to whether or not it was good, or we can make some improvements elsewhere. Okay. All right. That was the transition. Those are the new practices or activities that were out there that provide more opportunities for you guys as TSPs. Do we have any questions?
We do, and an attempted answer, but maybe you can elaborate. The question is from Jackie Johnston. Will becoming a TSP potentially take away forest management plans from private consultants? And I'll just mention how Amanda responded, knowing that you know best. My understanding is that a significant number of TSPs are in fact private consultants who have the appropriate training to provide technical assistance to producers.
Yeah, that's correct. Theoretically, yeah, it actually should help your business because it's going to provide financial assistance to customers to pay for your services, where otherwise they would be paying it on their own. So that's the intent of the program. Does that answer your question, Jackie?
Yes, she says yes.
Some conservation professionals in the private sector seek and receive from NRCS a certification as a TSP, which allows them to provide services to farmer or government funding incentives.
I think that was just Amanda supplementing her
Yep.
previous answer.
Yeah. I didn't read that it was who it was from. Sorry.
All good. Other questions from the room? I can tell you guys from my perspective, this is a lot to process. So take notes, know that this is being recorded and you'll be able to watch it again, but also don't be shy about asking questions now or later, because it is a lot of information and with a fair level of technicality involved.
Correct. Okay. So let's talk about the application process. So from application to certification. So what would happen is, as a TSP, you're going to apply for an activity and or a practice. Then you become certified by us for that activity or practice. And once you become certified, then you are eligible to get hired by a participant to write those activities or design those practices with participants who are enrolled in Farm Bill programs. Then you have that pre-site meeting with the NRCS, the client, and the TSP to discuss those goals and expectations. The activity is written or the practice is designed, and then that action is approved by the participant. They sign off on it, and then the NRCS reviews it, and then if it approves it, then the approved activities are paid out to the participant, or as we mentioned previously, if the participant wants to sign over the direct payment to you guys, there's forms that they can do for that as well. So real general workflow of how this works, and we're gonna go over some of those steps, the things in between those steps in these upcoming slides. So the first steps of becoming a TSP is the application process. So this information is provided to you on the NRCS's TSP website, but I'm going to go over it here just in case if there's any questions, comments, or concerns about the process, that we can get those addressed here, and so you don't have to feel like you're out on your own to try and figure this out. So the first step is making a plan, and if you select the link that's under that make a plan option, it's going to open up an Excel sheet that has all the practices that are offered across the entire country. So just note that it's not specific to Maryland, it's a national document. So there might be practices there that aren't even available to us in Maryland. But how do you read this particular document? Well, this is your practice. This is your practice code. This tells you what it is. Is it a practice or is it an activity? In this case, it's a practice. This is the unit of what we want that particular, the unit quantity of what we want that particular practice to be recorded. So when you're writing a practice schedule for your CPA, you're going to say we need, 200 feet of access road, and that's the quantity of which we would describe it. It's not a cubic thing because the standard has specified that it needs to be at least 10 inches deep and 10 feet wide. So that's built into the practice standard. Does that make sense? Like that's why those feet are those units that are there, because that helps us understand the quantities a little bit better. This particular practice is an engineering practice, more specifically construction engineering. And so over here, we can see all the things that you would need to provide in the application for this particular practice. We need to see that you, since it's an engineering practice, you need to be certified in the state of Maryland to practice engineering. There's technical trainings that are provided in AgLearn. I think there's only 2 trainings there. And then experience and education also need to be there. I will say that experience, if you can, not copy and paste all of the different, for all the practices that you're doing. I need, when I'm looking at this review, I'm looking to see, can you demonstrate that you've actually done things that are similar or for this particular practice. An example that I've provided in the past is that I had an engineer who, in their experience, told me that they were in stormwater management and they were trying to apply for fish raceway and track, which is a oddly an engineering practice, and it's used to develop waterways for aquaculture. And so there was nothing in that resume that made me think that this person had any experience with aquaculture, and that stormwater management is not aquaculture. So I called the TSP and asked them to clarify this stuff. So you might get, if the experience doesn't match up with the practice and it doesn't demonstrate that you have that skill, then you could get deferred for those practices. Okay, the next step in this is, as you're so in this first step, you're kind of taking a look, seeing what's required for those practices or what you might be interested in doing. And if you find that you're saying, hey, you know what, I think I want to put in an application, the next thing that you need to do is you need to get eAuth access. So the next step on that website will actually give you this link right here. You're going to click that link and you're going to fill out a form, and it's going to send you an email where that's basically going to verify that you have access to that email and you're going to activate your account. Then once you activate your account, you should get another email to verify your identity. And there's two different ways that you can verify your identity. You can do it online with that email, which you would just go in to that email and you're going to put in some personal information. You're going to answer questions that's going to validate your identity. I think it's like previous places that you've lived kind of questions. And then if you answer all those correctly, your EOF will be verified. Your identity will be verified, and then you can go on into registry and log into registry. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that online, you can go into any FSA office in your particular county, and there'll be an individual called an LRA, and LRAs can verify your identity. I would recommend calling your FSA office if that's what you're planning on doing, and setting up an appointment to do an EOF verification appointment before just like walking in and asking them to do it, because they may or may not be available. So it saves everyone a little time. All right, so once you've verified your identity and you've logged into registry successfully, then you're going to need AgLearn access. And AgLearn access is so you can take some technical trainings. That's the there's an orientation course on how to become TSPs, so you can learn the NRCS language and the planning process. There's the FOTG course that you need to take. I think those are the only two courses that are basically required for like all of the particular practices and or activities. There are some practices and activities that require additional trainings, but you'll see that in the making a plan document that's there. So anyways, you'll need AgLearn to do coursework that's required for your certification. In that process, to get AgLearn access, you need to email your state TSP coordinator. That's me in the state of Maryland, and you'll need to provide me your TSP number, and when you and I'll send a PII document that's basically saying that you've read this document, that you have taken a training on how to not share personally identifiable information while working for the government, or like doing contract work for the government. And you'll sign it, date it, and it'll come back to me, and then I'll put in a request to get your AgLearn's permissions. It takes about a week, sometimes two, depending on the influx of how many people are wanting AgLearn permissions to get that. But I will let you know when you do get AgLearn permissions. But that shouldn't stop you from going into your application and putting in the states, the counties, and the practices that you wish to apply for. So not having access to AgLearn will not stop you from working on the application. So you can get that started. And that's the end of the application process. Well, what we'll talk about next is some practices and activities require a sample of work, and for the application, and then everything requires a sample of work for practice certification for payments. So we're going to talk about how do you decipher what is required for the different activities and the practices in this next section. But does anyone have any questions about the practices or the application process now?
I have a quick question, Michael. You mentioned and you gave the example of the stormwater and the fisheries person, and how they really weren't showing evidence of being qualified. What would somebody do to gain the kind of experience needed to meet the qualifications of a practice that they don't currently meet?
I mean, they just have to, like, in this case, if your entire engineering career was spent on doing stormwater management, then you're not going to have the technical skills for us to say this person can do this. Now, if you're going to go off and work for some other company that does these kinds of things, and you can put that on a resume, we can verify that you've got this experience, then yes, that'll work. Yeah, I mean,
Is work experience the only avenue?
Well, it's a combination of education and work experience. So oftentimes, depending on your level of education and some more work experience is necessary. So yeah, I mean, it just depends, and it's practice specific, and that's why this document is really nice, because it'll kind of outline all that for you.
I see 2 hands up. I think I saw Sandy's first. Forgive me if that's not the right order. Sandy? Sandy, if you're talking, we can't hear you. I'm not sure if you're trying to be in the room or not. I tell you what, hold on to that question while you get connected, and we'll go to Hannah.
Yeah, real quick. So NRCS doesn't provide any training for particular practices. Am I understanding that correctly? So if I had some experience, I wouldn't be able to like do some education through NRCS to develop the experience I need to be approved for a practice.
Yeah, that's as I mean, the idea here is that, you know, if we had the technical skills to train if we had the ability to train you guys, we would train our staff, right? So we're trying to contract, we're trying to streamline or provide more opportunities for that. I think that there are conversations about additional like resources that might be available, but I haven't heard anything from NHQ that is on solid ground, so I'm not going to be able to provide any information on as to whether or not we will be doing that in the future.
Okay, Hannah, hopefully that answers your question. Sandy, are you on? Still not hearing you, Sandy. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I see that you're calling in on the phone. There may not be a good way for us to get your question into the room, barring, let me see if I can. I don't know that I can do this for you. I will try. No, I don't have the capacity to unmute you. I'm sorry.
I think you just did. Can you hear me now?
Yes, here you are.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. As a, I guess, a state employee attending this, I was just curious if there seems to be a lot of really good information that's been covered so far, but at least for me, it was slightly difficult to maybe understand exactly what information is needed. I understood the resume example, but I think it's been a bit of a barrier for us. And I think, as you alluded to before, the prevalence of acronyms sometimes makes it really difficult to understand what's needed. I don't know if there's any ability to even just do a getting started roadmap with, you know, email your state coordinator, send them your resume. Your resume maybe has to include justification for what practices you're asking for.
I mean, that's kind of what I've been trying to do with this particular presentation, and I'm working towards where to find what is expected for each activity and or practice. Up until this point, we've talked about what the application process looks like and what information is needed, and then like in a general sense, and then we'll go into like where do we find that information for what is required, or those deliverables. Those are the expectations. Okay. And you would not email your resume to the state coordinator. Everything needs to be done through the registry. You can email your coordinator and ask questions, but are you, as a state employee, trying to become a TSP? Because I don't believe that that's allowed. To do that on state time, because it's for private consultants.
Right, understood. Without getting into the nitty gritty of our intricacies here, yes, that was a consideration. There are certain instances where those plans are needed. But regardless, we also have some in-state individuals who were interested, but at least I know for myself, getting to, I made it as far as getting the E off, and it just, there was a lot of ambiguity. So I appreciate this presentation. I look forward to seeing more of it, and I appreciate you working on getting a roadmap together.
Thanks so much, Sandy. You're not alone. It is a process that requires some wading through. So hang in there. Michael, are you seeing the other comments in chat from Sarah, Joella, Simon?
Yeah. So when you so there are a couple of different qualification methods that you can choose for practices, and those will be listed in the Make a Roadmap. And then when you go into registry and you select the practice or activity that you want, there'll be options for you to choose. And if you select like whatever it's asking you within the registry, so whichever option you want to choose, whether it be like education and experience or experience and license certifications, you'll be able to click those, and it's like a tree, and it'll show you, okay, these are the things that you need to provide. So then it'll say you need to provide what experience you have. There's a state license for this particular practice, and perhaps a sample of work is also needed for the certification of that particular practice. So
I'm just wondering, in the sheet that you shared where it has the practices and then the list of education and experience, whether those are and or requirements, if that makes sense. So
yeah, they are, and it all depends on the practice and how you select it.
Oh, okay. And then I just had one additional question about, you were saying that most of these practices are things where you're expected to have the outside expertise that you're bringing as a contractor to NRCS. But I'm curious, for practices like the ability to write a conservation plan, I saw that on the list, which made it seem like as a TSP, you could be trained to write an NRCS approved conservation plan. And it looked like the qualifications needed for that were training from NRCS about how to write those plans.
Yeah,
So
the planner certification is a certification process through the NRCS. So you would have to take courses that we provide that are specific to planner certification. So like, for example, you would have to take the Conservation Planning Part 2 course. And that's a general course that we have for conservation planners. But like, that's a course that is required for a certification. This isn't like us providing a training isn't going to be like a 2 day or a day training on some sort of thing isn't enough to put on a resume that you've demonstrated that you have the experience to do this, that we would provide.
Right. But with that conservation plan in particular, it seemed like that was, I should look back at it now because I closed the window, but it seemed like that was the more substantive part of the experience that was needed. Anyway, it just made me wonder if, I'll go back and find it and I'll put a question in the chat, because I was curious basically if you could come in having, a background working. Well, I'm not sure. That just seemed like a practice where it was more reliant on NRCS training, but
That's
I'll
an activity, not a practice. So it would and again, there would like the ag-learn trainings, like that would be for the conservation planner. There are many ag-learn trainings that you will have to take. Part of those are in-person courses that the NRCS will provide, but it's not on the job experience per se. It's just being familiar with our planning process. Because yeah, we'll talk about that.
Right.
Because well, when you guys are writing your plans, you guys aren't doing an environmental evaluation. That's our responsibility.
Okay.
Right. So you wouldn't be able to provide that without the training that we would have.
Okay. I guess I'm looking at in this spreadsheet, I'm seeing practice name, conservation plan, practice code 199. So that's where I'm looking.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious because under certification, it says you need a professional certification. So you need to do these trainings through NRCS, it looks like. And you need to complete a plan that is all certified by NRCS, but I'm not seeing anything about needing a particular educational background or experience. So that was why it seemed different to me than the other practices.
Well, like I said, like, if there's not an educational requirement for it, they probably did that because they want engineers and biologists and like all sorts of people to be able to write conservation plans. So they just probably made it to where if you take all these courses and you go through the planner certification process through your state, you can become certified to write plans.
Okay, yeah, that's how it seemed. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right. Next section we'll be going over is the deliverables. So these are the requirements for certifications, whether it be for your application, certification for your application or certification for practices or activities that you are submitting for financial assistance programs. So we'll take a step back and talk about the CPAs, DIAs, and CMAs again, just so we're familiar. Like for CPAs, you got to be certified for. You got to be a certified TSP for that. DIAs can be certified, need to be certified TSPs for that. The intricacy here is that, is that, let's say, this comes back to like one of those things where like you might be you might have technical experience for 2 practices, and this person has technical experience for 3 different practices, and this DIA calls for all 5 of those practices. A particular individual can hire the 2 TSPs for the same contract items to design those practices, but it would be up to the participant and the client or the TSPs to figure out how you guys are going to work out that payment stuff. But as long as the plans as long as the plan and designs are being written by people that are certified, we can accept those. And then with the CMAs, you just need to have that qualified individual requirement to be certified to write those plans. So this next slide, we'll be talking about the generalities that exist between the CPAs and what's like required. Basically, the deliverables section is giving you kind of a template of the of how the document could be formatted. And ideally, it's like if you format it like this, it makes it easier for us to kind of go through it. But it's just a suggestion. You can do anything that you want, really. But what we're looking for is a cover page that includes your name, your TSP number, signatures from both the client and you, and then the contract number that's on it. Then we need to see a section that has notes and correspondence, which is like what we call Con6 notes, or some people call conservation notes, which is just a basically written documentation for all the decision-making conversations that were had between the TSP and the client and even the NRCS. So it's just, are you documenting all of these things throughout the process as to why you made the decisions that you guys made. The big one that I'm highlighting here is that resource inventory. That is very different. Like that's the planning process, is like, how did we identify a problem and what are we going to do to address that problem, and what tools did we use to do that evaluation. That's important for the conservation planning activity. Then there's a map section that needs to be included. And then the last thing is a practice schedule, where we need to have, the practices, the quantities, and where are those going to be, like what fields and what tract are those particular fields located. Okay, so the DIA is essentially similar in those first 3 categories, but the difference here is those design and implementation details, which are talking about those like site-specific information about the practice and how that practice is going to address the resource concern. Where you can find this information, and we'll talk about this in the resources portion of this presentation, is the sample of work, and then we as an agency provide you with documents for or a form that is a acceptable form to document the specifications for your particular practice. Those are called IR sheets. And then, you know, you need a map that also shows where those practices are going. So that section of the DIA is what, you know, differentiates it between the CPA and the DIA, is that you're getting into more technical work as to like what are the specifications of that particular practice and how is it going to address those resource concerns, and then documenting as such. The CMAs do have you know, these section headers, but there's nothing like, they're also very different, and they're a little more complex than the CPAs and DIAs, so there's not really a way to like generalize what those like what's kind of like needed or what makes them different, because they all are kind of very different. But we'll talk about where you can go to get those in an upcoming slide, but let's put this all together. So earlier I said, let's talk about how you can have a CPA and a DIA in the same contract and how that would work. So you're going to develop your soil health plan. That plan identifies compaction as a resource concern, and you're going to recommend a practice to address that resource concern. And that's your the plan is then approved by the client and then the NRCS, and then payment is made for the CPA. And then once that's done, then you can take that design, you can take this plan and say, I'm going to design a cover crop that's going to address the practice that we, or the resource concern that we have. So you provide that information that's there, and then the plan is then approved by the client, then the NRCS payment is made. And then if you want to, so that would be one contract with the CPA and DIA, and then afterwards the client could apply again to actually get the practice, to apply to get the practice cost shared as well. So that could be how this process could work, where you have the CPA and DIA in one contract, and then another contract, the practices of which were the resource concerns, the practice that would address the resource concern identified, and the practice to the practice design, and then the practices that I'm sorry, you would have a separate contract for the practices that were identified, that were designed. So those are different contracts. So I'm thinking I'm going to go forward on this one on the FOTG and the available resources, because I think this is going to help answer some of the questions that we have currently. So I'm just going to go through here. So this will all help when you get your AgLearn permissions. There'll be trainings on the TSP orientation and the FOTG, but I'll go over a little bit of what the FOTG is and how you can use this as a resource to help you understand what is expected and what's not, and all that other stuff. So hopefully this helps out. But essentially, the FOTG is an online library that's a technical reference, and it's state specific. So you need to be mindful that there are practice standards that are different by states. So the feds will come out and say, here's a practice standard, but there might be nuances that are more restrictive for a practice standard depending on the state. So you should be aware about those practice standards for the state that you are working in. So how does the FOTG organizes itself into these 5 sections, and I'll go over in general what those 5 sections house and how they can be useful for you in the planning process and designing these practices. So the first section is just the general resources. It'll include laws that are relevant for the state that you're working in, general state maps that might be important to the state's priorities, watershed information, and then there could be some manuals and handbooks that are specific to certain ways that programs are administered in the state. So it's good to kind of get a general sense of what's in that state's general section of their FOTG. The next section, and this, I think the section 2 and section 3, I think will be the ones that are more applicable to you guys. And so this is the natural and cultural resources information. This provides some like tools, assessment tools, or for us in Maryland, we have guides that the standards will point to. It's like, so if you want to, like for example, if you want to do that cover crop for compaction, the standard in Maryland will point you towards the planting guide, and it'll say if you're gonna plant a planting guide, these are the specifications that you need for cover crop practice to address that resource concern. So that's how you would marry those two things together. We have a wildlife guide, and then the last thing is that assessment tool. Since most of us are talking about soil health, I was going to show a little demonstration on that. So, but first, let's talk about section 3, which is like resource concerns and planning criteria, which that's how we operate in the NRCS. We're identifying resource concerns. Resource concerns are resources that have been identified to not meet planning criteria. So if it doesn't meet planning criteria, then it's considered a resource concern, and we can do something to address that. Also in section 3, and before we go into that in a little more detail, I want to say that section 3 also has the link for the CPAs, DIAs, and CMAs and those standards, just so you can find those easily. But the thing that I think will be the most important for you guys and learning about is the National Resource Concerns List and Planning Criteria. That's found in section 3. So this is a document that shows you or describes to you how what land uses need what evaluation tools and what is considered planning criteria or not. So when you're writing your document, you know, like everyone's should be speaking the same language of like, we've identified that this is a problem because we use this method, and everyone's kind of using the same method, if that makes sense. Okay, and section 4 is the practice standards and supporting documentation. So that's going to have it's going to have every single practice that the state has made available to it. And so some states will offer some practices and some states may not. So it's good, like a good way to check to see if a state offers a particular practice is to check section 4 of the FOTG. And some of the things that will be more pertinent to you all is understanding the practice standard. So the practice standard, so you'll click on a practice, let's do the forest standard improvement, and you'll see in this particular practice standard, it's got a definition, a purpose, and criteria. So you can use forest standard improvement to do any of these particular resource concerns, to address those resource concerns. So standards are a way to identify what practices are appropriate for what resource concerns identified. And then they also have like criteria that are listed in them that you can read. And so there's like a general criteria, or there might be more specific criteria based upon different resource concerns, because this is looking at wildlife, plant pest pressure, carbon stock. So those are wide ranging of resource concerns, and the way to address them is going to be different, because the criteria will be different based upon how you want to address them or what you've identified as a problem. Excuse me. So that's the practice standard. The next thing is like, so, oh yeah, the practice standard is helping with like the planning process. Like, so you've gone out and you've identified a problem. You're like, okay, so what options do we have to address this? And you can use the practice standard. There's also an Excel sheet that I'll talk about later in this presentation that might be able to do that a little bit easier, but the practice standard is more specific to the practices, whereas the Excel sheet is everything. So it might be a way to use as a filter. I use it as a filter. So the next thing would be the statement of work. So if you are designing a particular practice for, if you're designing a practice, you need to both look at what the conservation practice standard says, and then also what the statement of work looks like for what's required, what do we need within that design, and then the technical specifications would be outlined in the standard, and whether or not that standard is referencing to another technical document like the Maryland Planting Guide. So each state will have their own practice standards. So you should be familiar with those. The next thing is we call it an implementation requirement or an IR sheet, but it's basically a job sheet that's got detailed information about what was the baseline situation and what does success look like. What does success look like? And each state has their own IR sheets. And and there is no like requirement that you have to use NRCS IR sheets. And you can actually make your own, but it needs to have this, like, it needs to have the information that is telling us what are the specifications for the practice that you're designing, and what does success look like. If we're going to go from 120 basal feet per acre to 190 or to 90, how are we going to do that? What is where is the extent of that on the landscape? And so you need the maps, the written plans and specifications. Are you going to do a thinning, or are you planning on doing a crop tree release? Those kinds of things. And then this last section, section 5, has the conservation effects, which is the spreadsheet that I was talking about. That's the CPPE. That document has a list of all the practices and whether or not they have a positive or negative effect on resource concern. So it's a real, if you're like, okay, I think that this is a resource concern, and you want to see what practices address that on a whole, then you can see, okay, this practice addresses this resource concern. Then you can go to the practice standard and see what criteria is needed for planning this particular thing. And is it referencing another document or manual that you need to use for specifications? And then if not, then you need to provide all the information within the statement of work that it's being asked for that practice for a proper design. The last thing I'll talk about and the other resources that we have here is finding a TSP. So this is the registry for the public. So if you want to figure out what individuals are available already in the state and practices, you can do this to see who is your competition, or if there's not anybody that's there. This is a good way to do that. There's a few pointers here. You're going to select the state. You can select the county, and then here, this isn't really a filter, and so much that if you select 2 different practices, it's going to bring back a number. It's going to bring back everybody that's certified in one or the other, or even both. It's not a filter of just showing who's certified for both. So if you're going to be searching this, you have to do it iteratively, meaning you have to click one practice per search to see all the available TSPs that are there. And then the last thing I'll point out in this is that be mindful of these practices that have the 2X next to them. Those are sunsetted practices, whether there be practices or activities. They either have a different name or a different practice code. So those are legacy ones. So I wouldn't use those as a search option. They're just there so we can make sure that if any contract that was written, like we have those because there might be active contracts where those activities or practices are still contracted, and they'll come off the books when those contracts are off our books, and we'll get rid of them. So that's why they're there for now, but just know that don't click the ones that have X's on it. So anyone have any questions about that? I was going to go over like a real quick example of the FOTG, and maybe this might answer some of the questions about planning criteria and how to use the standards and the planning criteria and the statements of work.
And don't hesitate to use chat if you don't want to pop in on audio for any questions now or before we wrap up.
Okay. I'm going to pull this over here. Let me know when you guys can see. You can see?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the National Resource Concern List and Planning Criteria. So this is how we would use, this is the document that we would use to define planning criteria. So down here, we're going to go to organic matter depletion. So how are we going to define if organic matter depletion is occurring there? Because there could be a couple of different ways to do this. So they've provided tools. So we have a national or in-state soil health assessment worksheet, which actually Maryland has a soil health card that you can use, or you can use any of these methods here to describe whether or not the planning criteria is met. And then over here, these are things that you can do to show that planning criteria will be met based upon the plan that you're writing. So this is in section 3 of the FOTOG. So I guess I'll just start off at the very beginning so you guys can see the website. Starts off here. You need to come down and select the state of which you're interested in looking at. So we are Maryland and the DC area. And then because we went to this resource concerns and planning criteria that's located here, National Resource Concerns and Planning Criteria. So this helps you understand how we define planning criteria and what tools are available for defining planning criteria. And then in this particular document, we said, you know, there's a infield soil health assessment worksheet that we provided. So in Maryland, we can go up here to what assessment tools do we have available to us. So here's all the assessment tools that we have. And we have a soil health assessment and we have a soil health assessment card. So you can come in here and you can read all of this. And I think at the very end, these are how you can do a assessment on soil health that we would accept. Does that make sense? So then you've done the soil health assessment and you've identified that there's a resource concern for organic matter depletion. So then you can go to the conservation physical effects form and you can go to the CPPE and you can hit this document. And this lists all the different practices that are available nationally. And we can come down to organic matter depletion. Now, if it's a 0, it has no effect. A 1 is a slight, like 5 is the best and 1 is meh. And then there are also negative numbers for that too. So you can come down here and you can see what practices. So conservation cover is one of the best practices you can use to address soil organic matter depletion. Does that make sense? Conservation crop rotation is another one. So let's go to conservation cover. So then we'll go back up to the, oops. Oh yeah, I'm in. So let's go back to the photog. Let's go to Maryland. I'm gonna go to the practice standard, and I'm gonna come down here, and I'm gonna go to conservation cover. So in the conservation cover portion of this, we have our statement of work, we have an IR sheet, and we have our conservation practice standard. So we'll go in here, and we'll see here that in fact, Maryland says that we can use this to improve soil health. So let's go down here. To maintain or improve soil organic matter, select plants that will produce high volumes of organic material. Use the SCI index procedure to determine the amount of biomass needed in a specific program or criteria. So all it's asking for here, and this will be part of the technical review that we'll do, is that like, are you picking plants that have high volumes of organic matter, if that is what you're intended to, or organic material, if you're trying to plant this practice to address organic matter depletion, right? And then from there, you're like, okay, so that's some of the things that we need. Let's go to the statement of work. So the design, you'll need to know the planting dates, site preparations, what species are you using, what are we going to do, what is the management of that vegetation after establishment, is there a wildlife consideration, is there a operation and maintenance plan, how, like, since every practice has a lifespan, you're going to have to provide to the individual what they need to do for maintenance to keep this practice operational or functional within its lifespan. And then let's see, where's the map at? Practice purposes, certification that design meets practice standards. So that's the IR sheet, that the certification that the design meets the practice standards. So that's the IR sheet. And so that's how you would use those three different things. You would use the planning, the planning criteria to figure out how do you evaluate soil health. You use the soil health card. You've determined that soil health was a resource concern. And then, or excuse me, organic matter depletion was a resource concern. You went to the CPPE to see that conservation cover is a practice that really improves organic matter depletion. Then you went to the standard and to see if there's any standard specifications that were outlined by the state as to how to meet that standard. And then you went to the sample of work to then see what are all the things that you need to provide to design that for us to accept it. The first, everything.
Let me just jump in with a 2-minute warning in case we have any last-minute questions.
Okay. Yeah.
If you all need to hop off and the event goes a little bit longer, you can find the rest of it on the recording. Michael, carry on.
Oh,
I do see a question from Sarah in the chat there.
Yeah, and I can just ask it. I might be alone, but I'm kind of sensing that maybe others on the call might have a similar perspective. So I just wanted to share that, you know, I'm coming in as a non-engineer, non-biologist, someone who came to agriculture later in life. And I became curious about becoming a TSP because I kept hearing from NRCS in my state, in Maine, that there was a real lack of TSPs who could offer these services. What I'm hearing today is making me think that TSPs, at least in Maryland, are really meant to be technical experts like engineers and biologists. And I was wondering if that's the right thing to take away from this presentation today, because I had seen that in my state, at least, there might be opportunity and benefit to farmers to have more staff outside of NRCS trained to write general conservation plans, help growers access funds, write the new soil health management plans. So just curious if you could address that, if, a TSP is really not the right avenue, I guess, to meet my particular goals.
I mean, that depends entirely on what it is that you're trying to apply for. So if you're applying for engineering practices, you need to be a licensed engineer. If you're applying for forestry practices, you need to be a licensed forester. If you're doing wildlife practices that are for threatened and endangered species, you need to have a certification for that as well.
Right, but I
So
mean, so just to write an NRCS conservation plan, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even NRCS staff are not all trained in how to design different, roadways and things like that. So they aren't all able to do these kinds of specialized practices, but there is a basic conservation planning process that I saw was practice 199. That's what I would like to do, is to work with growers to help them access funding through EQIP and other programs like that. And in addition to write soil health management plans. So those are my ideas. Is that something that you need specialized training to do?
depending on how your state is handling its planner certification process, I can't speak to how Maine would do that. But in Maryland, you would need to go through all the courses that we require all of our people to do, and then you would have to write conservation plans that meet our standards.
Right.
And those would be vetted. You would have at least 2 of those practice or plans that would be vetted, and we would make sure that you're following the steps from 1 to 9.
Right. But you could do that work as a TSP.
If you were certified, yeah.
Right. Okay, that's
I
helpful.
mean, if you meet all the qualifications and criteria for the particular practice, then yes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So Michael, it is 3:31. How would you like to move toward concluding?
I mean, I've set aside this for you guys, so if I can stick around and answer questions as best as I can, as long as people have questions. So it's up to you, but I'm available if needed.
So Eve has a question. How can we find out what is the compensation being offered if we are successfully approved to become a TSP, hourly, salary, project specific, etc.?
Okay, so that's a great question. So NRCS pays for things by item numbers, but how the client pays you is going to be that agreement between you guys. So if you want to see what we pay for, I don't know if the payment schedules are out yet. Maryland, EQIP. Why are these payment schedules incomplete?
Maybe new fiscal year, things just haven't.
Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, that's exactly what's happening. The payment schedules aren't supposed to be released until the 29th or 27th of October. So I was hoping to find but this one's last year's. Let me see if I can find something that we have in our programs SharePoint that would be helpful here. But basically that website that I just showed you would be a good source to go to. It's just NRCS, payment schedules. And then it'll show you the item by item what we pay for scenario. So, oh wait, and I'll get into that in just a second if I can. Of course, the programs button is not there right now. Well, let's try another state real quick.
No, I was just about to say, we are no longer seeing that screen. Thank you.
Let's see if California. No, I don't want to do RCPP. I do equip. Here we are. Okay. So you'll go to the state of which you're interested, and oftentimes, so depending on, I'm going to use equip because TSPs are primarily fueled through equip. Now it could, as far as I know, CSP is not an avenue that TSPs can work because oftentimes another word to know is enhancements. That's an additional thing to a practice that you can use that's an eligible thing within CSP. And those aren't something that TSPs can at the moment participate in. That could change. So an RCPP, since those are agreements between third parties, so it's NRCS and somebody else, they get to determine what practices are eligible within their particular how they want this program to work. So if they don't choose activities, then an activity might not be available for you to choose. So the best case scenario here is just to go to general equip, and that'll be all of the things that are offered through the state through general equip. So here we have, these are activities, these 100 to, I think 300 is when the practices start. So anything below 300 is a activity. These are the things that you would use in your for the plans that you would write. So let's say you're writing a grazing management design. A couple things how to read this. So if you are working with a traditional customer of the agency, you would get the base rate. But if you're working with a historically underserved producer, which the agency has definitions for, and they have to meet those definitions, then they get a higher payment rate for the same thing. So if you're designing a grazing plan for less than 100 acres, then you're going to get that much money in the state of California. So if you want to see what I think he's trying to talk and he's muted.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Hey.
Scott. Hi, Scott.
Hi, sorry, those rates that we're looking at, is that the rate that would be paid for the overall practice or activity, or the rates that would be paid to the TSP for services? They look generous if they're the rates paid to the TSP for the service, but I'm unclear.
So that's the rate that we pay to the producer to have the design done. That's what we pay. What you see on this sheet is what you pay if it meets that scenario, right? So if you're designing your grazing management plan and you're designing a grazing management system for less than 100 acres. Now remember, this is California, so I don't have Maryland's numbers, so they could be different,
Yeah.
probably are different. This is how much the agency would pay the individual who is the contract holder. And now what you and the contract holder or the client decide to work together on is entirely up to you. We don't play a role in that. We just pay our price.
And for something in that, so in order to do, so you'd have a feed management plan, but then there might be an additional cost incentive to the producer, to the contract holder, for feed management plan implementation.
Okay,
Is
so
is that accurate? So I'm just like, so the feed management plan, that sounds to me like something that would, you know, a landowner doesn't have the expertise. They're going to rely on a TSP to create that plan. So the TSP could legitimately say, okay, well, this is what NRCS pays you for the plan, that goes to me. When we get to implementation, those fees go to you, the producer, because you're, you know, the producer's bearing the cost of actually, you know, tractors in the field and labor actually putting work into place. Does that sound about right? Am I thinking straight about what I'm reading?
I'm not sure what your question was. I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to, I guess I'm still trying to get at, you know, get certified as a TSP. How do I start to gauge the prices that I talk to these people about? I guess this is where we do it. I guess if it's listed as a plan, that's work that a TSP would do. So, you know, maybe I can say to the producer, $3,000, and I can write you a feed management plan, and then the producer will subsequently, upon approval of that plan, they would then be eligible to get their $1,000 for implementation activities. I'm just wondering, like, I guess I'm just confused. I'll let you go on and see if anybody else has questions.
Well, so like,
And Scott and Michael, I apologize. We are going to have to close down the webinar because those of us who are kind of helping run this have another meeting coming up, myself
fine.
in 4 minutes. So Scott, I did offer Michael's email address in the chat. So please take advantage of that. I think I appreciate your question. You're basically trying to figure out how does a TSP determine what their pricing is? How much can or should they get paid out of what is provided from NRCS to the country?
Just trying to be reasonable and fair. Yeah, I appreciate all the time. I do very much appreciate the presentation. Thanks y'all for being here.
We appreciate
You're
everyone
welcome.
being here. It's a hefty topic, and we're happy to continue to answer questions via email as needed.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much. You obviously know your material, and we all have a lot to learn. We appreciate you spending this hour and a half plus with us. The YouTube will be up as soon as I can get it up in the next day or so for folks that want to see that. And we just would encourage you to reach back out to us via our email addresses as you have continued questions and things you're trying to work through.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Everybody have a good rest of your day, and we appreciate you being here.